How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Sports Talk YouTube channel. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for my first official mock draft of the NFL 2024-2025 season. This going for the 2025 NFL draft. Usually I do 3 to 4 of these a year as we go through. I do one or two throughout the season, and then throughout the off season I do a handful as well. But so yeah, obviously starting this one right now, there is a lot of interesting situations that could ultimately happen in this draft. We are only going to do the first round. There will be some videos throughout the week going over rounds 2 and 3, which I have done, but this video is just simply round number 1. It's going to be a little bit more of a longer formatted video, and hopefully you all enjoy it. But kicking off here today with the first overall pick, this is the Carolina Panthers. Now, I think the Carolina Panthers need to move on from Bryce Young. I don't necessarily think he's that great of a quarterback. And frankly, I think for Bryce Young's career, he just needs to be moved on from Carolina. I think right now, if you can't move on, or if he continues to stay there, you're probably going to have this team struggle for a little bit more. They brought in a new head coach this year. I think he tried to fix Bryce Young. It just ultimately didn't work. And I think he wants to have a guy that he can mold with himself who is just confident. And for that reason, my number one quarterback in this year's draft class is Cam Ward from Miami. He is cool, calm, collected. I would say if you had a heart rate monitor on him through the entire game, I don't think it would ever reach 100. He's just that cool, calm, and collected. He is an absolute warrior. I love watching him. And for me, I think for this Carolina Panthers team, getting Cam Ward would probably be the smartest move for their franchise moving forward. They washed their hands of the Bryce Young situation. They are no longer having to worry about that trade with Chicago of going, listen, we don't have Bryce Young anymore. We're not worried about that trade any longer. And they get Cam Ward. And if you were to ask both Sterling and myself here today, if we think this is a realistic spot for the Carolina Panthers to be drafting at come draft time, we would probably both be looking at going, this is a pretty solid spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only team that's going to be able to compete for that number 1 pick is the team that we currently have picking number 2 in this mock draft.
Yeah, and for this particular situation, the Tennessee Titans, they are a team that also needs to move on from their year 2 quarterback. Will Levis is just not that guy. And again, they also brought in some new coaching staff this year as well. And I think this is a situation of where the coaching staff tried to fix their young quarterback. It just didn't work. And we all know the Titans, they are pretty much just saying they've traded a handful of guys away and they are kind of wiping their hands clean. And for me, the guy that I had as my number 1 quarterback throughout most of this season now drops to number 2. And that's Quinn Ewers, quarterback from Texas. This is a guy I'm extremely confident with. I really love watching him play. Is he the most athletically gifted guy out there? No, but he's incredibly smart. He throws a pretty football. He's going to be someone that this Titans team can ultimately rely on for a few years. And if they start to build this organization up just a little bit more, I think Quinn Ewers could really take this team to a whole new level. Now we move on to the New England Patriots. They drafted a quarterback last year, Drake May. So far throughout this season, in the games that he's played, has he been perfect? No. Has he been terrible? Also, no. We've been talking about this this Patriots team really needing to just get a lot of help. They need everything. They need a number 1 receiver, and they need some O-linemen. They basically need everything. I think for the New England Patriots at this point, since they need so much, they just need to go with the best player in the draft. And that just also happens to be wide receiver / cornerback Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter is the best player in this draft. Do I think he's the best wide receiver in this draft? No. Do I think he's the best corner in this draft? No. But when you combine both of those abilities, and just the absolute game wrecking, whether you have him as a number one receiver and don't play him corner, or you have him as a corner and don't play him as wideout, or you use him as both, you are going to get a phenomenal, phenomenal player for this team moving forward.
Yeah, this will be a good pickup for the Patriots for sure. I could also see the Patriots at this spot opting to trade down a couple places, give somebody else Travis Hunter, and just try to accumulate a couple extra picks and go after an offensive lineman to help keep Drake May upright a little more. Both of those are viable options for sure as we get closer to the draft.
Yeah, and for the first mock draft of the year, I'm never really a trade type of a guy for mock draft. I will do trades during the off season, just once we start to get closer to the actual draft itself, then you'll start to see some trades because you kind of have a really good sense of who it's going to be. But if I were to say who would be a team to try to trade back from this spot, I agree with you. It would be the Patriots, but I just look at Travis Hunter going to the Patriots right here. He fixes a handful of issues for them. You get a really solid wide receiver that's going to come in, but you also get a really good, and in this case, number 2 corner on this Patriots team, because again, we all know they drafted, what's the kid's name from a few years ago that is playing fairly well this year? Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez was a former number 1 pick or first round pick for the Patriots. Looks really good. You put Travis Hunter in there in that secondary, it's really good, but you also get a really good wide receiver from that as well. New York Jets. Now, they won this week on Thursday, so they're probably not going to be in this number 4 spot for too much longer, and I don't expect them to be a top 5 pick team, but since this is where they are at right now, and let's just say if they were in this spot and they had to pick at number 4, I am not certain that they are not going to go quarterback. I look at this and I go, Aaron Rodgers is going to be 41 years old next year, if he's not already 41 years old. He hasn't played great this year. His last game on Thursday night, the second half, he was better for sure, but he has not been great. The age has definitely shown a little bit more, and if you're the Jets and you have a top 5 pick with this quarterback class, now the level of quarterbacks that are in this class are not the same as they were last year. There's still a bunch of starter caliber guys in this class, but I think the New York Jets, they elect to go quarterback Carson Beck out of Georgia in this one, because you just frankly can't tell me that the Jets, if they have a top 5 pick, don't try to find the heir apparent for Aaron Rodgers. Now, let's say Aaron Rodgers still plays next year. Well, guess what? You have Carson Beck, who can sit there for a year behind Aaron Rodgers and then take over the reins, and hopefully not have that Jets situation of where it's you're throwing in a guy that might not be ready yet. And I don't think Carson Beck is quite ready to start, but if you put him in that scenario, he could learn from Aaron for a year and be a pretty dangerous guy going into the future.
Yeah, and really that it is the biggest need that the Jets have going forward. They have a good team, a lot of talent, but as you said, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play forever, despite him thinking he's going to be able to. It's just not going to happen. And now is the time to get that successor. And hey, if Aaron Rodgers still plays next year, fine. That just means he can learn behind Aaron Rodgers. And I feel like at this age, Aaron Rodgers hopefully will be less of a dick about it and be much more comfortable going, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm 41 going on 42 now. Let's bring in my successor, unlike what happened in Green Bay with Jordan Love.
Yeah. And I still think that Aaron Rodgers was willing to teach Jordan Love. He was a lot more respectful about that than what, Brett Favre was when Aaron Rodgers got drafted. But
Yep.
yeah, I think at this point it would be a really good move for the Jets to make. Now moving over to the 5th spot in this year's draft, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is another team that needs a lot filled on this squad, but ultimately the player that just keeps coming up and the position that keeps coming up is offensive line. You paid Trevor Lawrence the amount of money that you paid him this offseason. You're not going to immediately just walk away from that contract. You need to protect him. You just traded away one of your offensive linemen to the Minnesota Vikings. you can't afford to not get this guy a premier blindside blocker. And I think LSU's Will Campbell, he's the best offensive lineman in this year's draft class. And Trevor Lawrence getting that guy is going to make his life a lot easier and just give him just that little bit of extra help. Again, a top 5 pick offensive lineman is not a sexy pick, but guess what? When we talk about the Lions offensive line, the Eagles offensive line, these great offensive lines in the league, they come from you drafting year after year offensive linemen.
And it is a sexy pick when you already have your franchise quarterback locked into a contract. Then it very much is. This is exactly what I was looking at for Jacksonville to do. They have a lot of other holes, but the other problems are going to be easier to remedy and fill through free agency than it will to find that big solid blindside blocker.
Coming up next is the New Orleans Saints, and this is another team right now that needs a lot of holes filled. They have a bunch of spots where you just kind of look at it and go, man, they need an upgrade. And I ultimately say they just kind of take best player available. And I think Mason Graham, the defensive lineman from Michigan, going to that New Orleans Saints team, he's going to be a game wrecker there, man. He's the best defender in the draft, in my opinion. He's the best guy on defense. You bring him in there for the Saints. Guess what? You have to go up against some talented running backs in that division, but you also just get some help and just try to reset that defensive unit. And he's going to be the anchor for this defense for years and years and years to come.
Yeah, 100%. That's the Saints' focal point this offseason going into the draft. It needs to be defense. They need to find a way to stop teams, and it starts in that front, that interior defensive line. Start up the middle and work your way out.
Coming up next is the Las Vegas Raiders. This one is not going to be a insane pick. It's going to be Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado. The Raiders, they need their franchise quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is probably the hardest quarterback to read in this draft class, meaning I just don't know what I'm getting from him as a pro. You see the explosive and just the insanely fun play from him, but he's also running around for trying to save his own life. He's forcing balls from time to time. He often runs with the ball when he doesn't need to run with the ball. And granted, his offensive line isn't great. His weapons, other than Travis Hunter, aren't superstar caliber. I've had some questions about the leadership before, where, he just simply called out his offensive line for not being able to block well enough in a press conference, going, you're the starting quarterback, man. Whether they are blocking or not blocking, you got to give those guys as much love as possible. But the talent right there speaks for itself. And at the end of the day, the Raiders need to go out there and get their franchise quarterback. That is simply what has been missing from this team. They are in a rebuild, so they're not necessarily going to be great next year. But if you can get that guy now and moving forward, it's going to be a really solid option for them. And he's already talked about, and the Sanders family has already talked about teams they're probably not going to want to go to. We talk about a player that is going to have a lot of situations of like, I'm not going to go to a team like Carolina or Tennessee or New England or the Jets. I could see Sanders saying, I'd be willing to go to Vegas. And as long as the Vegas lights don't get too bright for him and he's not gambling and partying every single night, the Raiders could have their franchise quarterback for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah, and really leading up to this, and anytime I look at any mock drafts, the Raiders are my number one team to be looking to land Shedeur Sanders, because they need that franchise quarterback, yes, but the Raiders are also one of those organizations that looks at the monetary aspect of how many jerseys can we sell. And Shedeur Sanders is likely to be a top 3 selling jersey from this draft class. And that is a reason why I think no matter where the Raiders land on the list, if Shedeur Sanders is available when they get up to the podium, that is going to be their pick, because he will sell them a lot of jerseys if he doesn't win them a lot of games.
Well, and not only that, but new owner of the Raider or partial owner of the Raiders, Tom Brady, has already worked out with Shador Sanders. He has a relationship with Shador. And
Yeah.
you know for a fact that Dion would be saying, hey, the owner's Tom Brady, man. Like I know that I can call that guy up there at any single moment, and it's gonna be a pretty easy situation. Number 8 overall, this is the Cleveland Browns, and this is a team, again, we've talked about it with kind of like in that situation with Carolina, with the Titans, with the Patriots, with the Saints. They have a lot of holes, man. But they need to move on from Deshaun Watson. And they need to find that. Now, Deshaun Watson, he's still going to be on contract, and sure, you can start him at next year's, but you need to find the guy that is going to be your option. And unfortunately for them, the quarterback market is starting to get a little bit thin here at the moment. But there's a guy in Jalen Milroe that I don't have as a first round guy. I think he's a little bit too run heavy for a quarterback for my liking. But I can see the arm talent there. I can see the explosive ability. And for right now, the Browns, they just need a guy that they can look at and go, man, we can build something with him. If with him on our roster, even with Deshaun there, we can build something with that. We saw what Kevin Stefanski can do with just even a partial talented quarterback. And with a guy like Jalen Milroe, he can bring him in and really mold him into the quarterback that he wants to see. He could be a little bit of that Lamar Jackson type role and go like, listen, we got ourselves one. And then for the Steelers at that point, it's really going, oh no, we really don't have our quarterback and we are officially number 4.
Yeah.
And this one just simply goes down to the fact that the Browns need to move on from Deshaun Watson and they need a quarterback. And Jalen Milroe, unfortunately, he's the 5th best quarterback in this class, but it's still a valid option for them to go after and do.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, that this is where the Browns need to start with their rebuild going forward, because that's really what they need to do with the amount of money they have invested in Deshaun Watson. I think the only way they move away from this and to something else is if somehow Jameis Winston emerges as a true option throughout this season and they extend him beyond. But that's pretty long odds for something like that to happen.
Well, even then, if Jameis Winston comes out and they say, you know what, we'll extend you for a year or two, and they just ultimately say, we're going to have Deshaun Watson as our number 3 quarterback or our number 2 while this our first round pick sits down, like there's a ton of options that the Browns can ultimately do. Next up at 9th overall, we have the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins need a lot of help on defense. Their defense is not good, but there is no greater position of need on this team for the Miami Dolphins, than offensive line. Tua Tagovailoa, if he's healthy, you can win a bunch of games with him, but you need him to be healthy. And the only way he's going to be healthy is if he doesn't get hit. Kelvin Banks Jr., the tackle out of Texas, is the 2nd best offensive lineman in this class. I know there are people that think he's actually better than Will Campbell. So if you are the Miami Dolphins, I keep combining offense and Dolphins together, but if you are the Dolphins at this point, everything you do this offseason needs to be going towards protecting Tua and getting one of the best offensive linemen in the draft is a very, very good way to go out there and get protection for your quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of times it's Tua doing it to himself, admittedly, like he's putting himself in bad situations. But even aside from that, you've got one of the more dynamic young running backs as well, and getting an extra offensive lineman that can help open up some of those running holes will be so key for this Dolphins team.
Moving forward to the final top 10 pick of the draft, where we have the New York Giants. This is a team that I highly suspect will be trying to trade up in the draft to go get a quarterback, because you can't realistically move forward without getting a quarterback in this draft. It's just unfortunate. Again, I'm not doing trades in this one, so I'm not really going to try to do that. But in this instance, we could see this happen like last year, where we saw teams trying to move up in the draft to get a quarterback. Ultimately, trades didn't go through. We could see the Giants be out of situation of where this exact situation happens, and every team goes, no, I'm taking my guy because we like our guy right here. And the Giants are out of a quarterback option. At this point, I think they just say, you know what? If we're going to have Daniel Jones as our quarterback, we're going to give him another wide receiver at the top end of the draft for him to throw the ball to. We saw what Malik Neighbors did, and we're going to add Tatario McMillan. I butchered the hell out of his first name, but adding him to this offense alongside Malik Neighbors is going to at least give Daniel Jones a shot. And I just simply look at it and go, you can't have the Giants, and even if you do end up drafting a quarterback in the second or third round this year, or you just wait until next year in 2026 to draft your quarterback, at least you're going to have NFL caliber weapons for him to throw the ball to, while Daniel Jones continues to fumble the ball away at this point and just be a terrible guy.
Yeah, I just missed the name you said there for the wide receiver.
Tatario McMillan,
Gotcha,
Arizona.
gotcha.
But yeah.
I could see that being a real option for them, just beefing up that wide receiver room. I could also see the Giants opting to go towards their secondary and just trying to stack their defense further and being like, hey, maybe we go that Pittsburgh Steelers route and we know our quarterback's not going to win games, but maybe we can build a defense that can win us some games, because they have been close this year to being able to do that with this defense.
Without a doubt. I just continue to go back to, if you are the Giants, you really only have Malik Neighbors, and that's been the only valuable option. So McMillan comes in. At least you have two guys for Daniel Jones to overthrow at this point.
Well, and that young running back Tracy they drafted last year is developing very well also. So they do have an option at running back now where they can look and go, well, we've got a few offensive weapons that Daniel Jones can ruin. So
yep. Now we're going over to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals, it's plain and simple. Every single position or draft pick this year needs to be defense.
Yep.
Needs to be defense. Whether it's your first round pick all the way to your 7th round pick, and every undrafted free agent needs to be defense. Now, I know that's not going to happen and they're going to go elsewhere, but you need to go after defense so aggressively. And honestly, one of the best defenders in the entire draft in Will Johnson, corner out of Michigan, is just right there for the taking. You need to go out there and just do anything, and any level, any position that you can add to that defense, and getting the number 1 corner in the draft, in my opinion, is going to be massive. You're going to have to go up against George Pickens twice a year. You're going to have to go up against Zay Flowers twice a year. And at that point, whoever the Browns have, at this current moment, but there are...
Well, beyond that, I mean, with how good this Bengals team, you're going to have to go up against Xavier Worthy,
Yep.
Or whoever the number 1 is there in KC as well. Like that's the thing. The defense is so key for this Bengals team. I'm sure they will take a wide receiver at some point in the day 3 as well, but early rounds, defense.
Yeah, like I said, if I was the Bengals, I would say I'm willing to give up a little bit of offensive talent this year to just really just get all of that defense just built up as best as I can. Again, not every defensive player you draft is going to be a starter, but maybe, let's say in round 5, if you just draft all defense and your round 5 guy turns into a superstar gem, you're going to be really happy about that, as opposed to just getting your 4th wide receiver on the board. And right now, the Bengals, they're not worried about quarterback. They're not worried about wide receiver. They're not worried about running back, tight end, or O-line. It's defense, man. It really is defense. And speaking of a team that also needs to heavily worry about their defense, that is the Los Angeles Rams. This is another team that right now, if I was them, I would be saying draft all defensive players for the first 3 rounds. Just continue to build that. Your first 2 round picks last year was an edge rusher and a defensive tackle. That was basically, we're spending our first 2 picks to try to replace Aaron Donald. It's great.
Yep.
Nothing else on your defense works right now. So you need to continue to go out there and do it. And I actually have them taking Siobhan Ravel, corner out of East Carolina, on this list. For you, Sterling, I know you're following along. He's ranked 26. To me, he's the second corner in this draft. Actually, he would be the 3rd-rated corner in this draft behind Travis Hunter, but Hunter is kind of that gadget both sides. But the Rams, they're going to have to go up against DK Metcalf and, Smith and Jigba, and then look at what the 49ers have and look what the Cardinals have. Just looking towards your division, you need to be able to stop some of their top receivers. And Ravel, he has been phenomenal this year. Sure, he's playing at East Carolina, but we talked about Devin Witherspoon's playing at Illinois a few years ago and going, well, he's not going up against the top tier talent. He's been fine. He's been 100% fine in the NFL. Doesn't matter where you get the talented corners. Hell, Sauce Gardner came from Cincinnati. Like, top tier corners, if they're good, you take them. And this kid is phenomenal. And I think the Rams, they ultimately get this guy, they bring him in, and they just get more comfortable with this situation. Dallas Cowboys up on the draft board next at pick number 13. Funny enough, as we were doing this, I just got news that Ezekiel Elliott for the Cowboys is sitting this week. And with this pick, I have them selecting running back Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. This is such a Cowboy move where they're taking a running back in the first round, in the top 15. But this is also one of those moves where I look at the Cowboys and I go, that would be a really good move. Because Ashton Jeanty, if you are not watching college football, which I already am criticizing you for not watching college football, but if you're not watching Ashton Jeanty play, this dude could go out there and break Barry Sanders' rushing record this year. He has 20 touchdowns so far this season. He is one of the most entertaining running backs you will see in college football. Right now, he should be your Heisman favorite as well, over a guy like Travis Hunter, over a guy like Cam Ward. He is doing those sort of things from the running back position. And you bring this kid into a Dallas team with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, and if that Dallas O-line can continue to improve and get back to a little bit more of that Dallas D-line or offensive line, this kid is going to be scary for the NFL to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a smart pick for Dallas. So, I mean, for me, I kind of hope they fumble it and they go somewhere else, like for a D lineman or something, because I don't want Dallas to have a good running back.
Yeah, neither would I, but Jerry Jones occasionally surprises us with an occasionally smart move. And this would be a very smart move for Jerry Jones to make. And I kind of hate it because I would hate to see Ashton Jeanty in Dallas, because then I would have to hate Ashton Jeanty, and I don't want to. But moving forward to the Indianapolis Colts, similar to the Bengals and the Rams, this is a team that needs all sorts of defensive help. They need it on their D-line, they need it in their linebackers, they need it in their secondary. And I think they just simply go with the best player available on the defensive side of the ball, and that is Malik Starks, the safety out of Georgia. We haven't seen a top 15 safety in a couple of years get drafted. When you have these level of safeties, you need to bring those guys into your young defense. Hey, maybe Indianapolis might have Matt Eberflus coaching their defense next year. Getting him a really talented safety like that is going to be big. But yeah, the Colts, they just have such a piss poor defense. It is a need for the Colts as well. And there's no tight ends, there's no linebackers, as we can see some of the needs there. I don't necessarily think interior defensive line is the area to go, obviously with DeForest Buckner still being there. But right there, man, just getting that safety help is going to make that defense just that little bit better.
You do, especially for the Colts in their division. They need to find a guy that can take the top off of the passing games of C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, now talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the Buccaneers, they need a bunch of help on defense. They really do. But what has happened over these last couple weeks for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, losing Mike Evans for a few weeks and losing Chris Godwin for the entire year, we've seen this offense start to struggle a little bit more. And the Bucks, they're locked in with Baker Mayfield for the next couple of years. They need to add a young wide receiver that can be that solid number 3 in this room, and that is Luther Burden III out of Missouri. You add this guy to a healthy Mike Evans and Chris Godwin offense. Oh my goodness. Baker Mayfield is going to have a field day with how good that team is going to be in terms of the wide receiver stuff. We're already seeing Baker Mayfield play at an MVP level this year. You do this, and all 3 of those guys are healthy with Bucky Irving, with the tight end Cade Orton there. That is a scary offense. Scary, scary, scary. At that point, we're looking at going, who needs defense when you can put up 45 points a game?
Yeah. Well, and even if for some reason Chris Godwin's not able to make it back, that gives them a solid number 2 option behind Mike Evans, which is something they sorely are going to need. But both of these guys back or not, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need youth at wide receiver next year.
Yep. Next up, we have the Seattle Seahawks. And for the Seahawks, this is a team that right now, they need some help at offensive line. And Cameron Williams is the best right tackle in the draft coming out of Texas. And that's pretty much their biggest need on that offensive line is right tackle. And if they can get the best right tackle in the draft and insert him into that O-line, that gives them a lot more help and makes everything just that little bit easier for them moving forward. And if you can give Geno Smith a little bit more time, you can open up some holes for the running backs. The offense can continue to look good.
Yeah, that's the biggest need for the Seattle Seahawks right now is beefing up that O-line. No matter who the quarterback is, no matter who's running the ball, they need to fix that O-line a little bit better.
Next up on the list is the San Francisco 49ers. Their next pick is just going to be one that I kind of look back to what they did last year when they drafted Ricky Pearsall, where we are kind of investing into the future. Now, granted, wide receiver is not our biggest need this year, but we're going to invest in the future and give our young quarterback as much to throw the ball to. This year's pick is kind of a bit of a need, but Ariante Essery, the tackle from Minnesota, completely butchered that name, so I apologize. But he's a guy that right now I think if you're comfortable with moving him to guard, that's going to be great. If you're comfortable playing him at right tackle, that's great. He gives you offensive line versatility. He does play left tackle in college, but obviously you're not going to take Trent Williams and move him. So
no, but Trent Williams is nearing the twilight of his career. So getting a guy in there that has the potential and ability to fill that role when Trent Williams leaves is going to be so vital in ensuring this team is good for years to come with Brock Purdy under center.
Yeah, he again, this is a future move, but it's also a now move. Because again, if Trent Williams decides to retire in the next 2 years, you want to be able to have a guy on your roster that you feel extraordinarily comfortable with coming into this year. Coming up to my Chicago Bears at pick number 18. It's not going to be a shock for anyone here. I'm selecting an offensive lineman with this pick. They're selecting Wyatt Millam, the tackle out of West Virginia. This has been a guy that has been climbing up draft boards immensely throughout this entire season, and I think he's only going to continue to climb up. PFF has his rating at like a 90 right now throughout his year. Again, he's not playing the world's top tier talent at West Virginia, but he looks like a really, really good left tackle, and the Bears need that. The more help that you can give Caleb Williams, the safer that you can keep him. Again, if Ben Johnson comes in, he's going to want some top tier talent at that tackle position, and you're going to have Millam and Darnell Wright as your 2 anchors on the opposite sides of the line. You're going to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, and that's just it. The Bears need to start winning the trench battles, and focusing on the offensive side of it is more important right now than on the defense side.
Taking a look here at the Arizona Cardinals, been a little bit better than I think a lot of us thought this particular season, and they need to continue to build up their defense. Jonathan Gannon is a defensive minded head coach. You know, we all know my thoughts on defensive minded head coaches, but whenever you talk about to a defensive minded head coach, they always talk about getting pressure up the middle. And Kenneth Grant out of Michigan is going to be a guy that is going to be able to burst through the seams. He's going to be able to find holes, get penetration, and he's going to be kind of that anchor alongside with their former one of their 2 first-round picks last year. I'm forgetting the kid's name. I actually have this written down here. And Darius Robinson was an edge rusher pick last year in the later stages of that draft. And just pairing those two guys up together, that really makes his defensive line stronger going into the future.
Yeah. This is Cardinals need to focus the early part of this draft on defense. Their offense has been improving. Got to get that defense cleaned up.
Los Angeles Chargers up next, and it would be really easy to pick a wide receiver at this stage, but there's a certain player from a certain school, from their certain head coach's former school that he coached, that just also happens to be a position of need. Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, going to the Chargers. This feels just a great need, and we all know Harbaugh knows exactly what this guy is. He's going to be able to pass catch, he's going to be able to run block, and you know Harbaugh is going to love that. And this is just such a fitting move. I think I don't really necessarily care where the Chargers are. I can probably pencil this one in here today that Loveland will be a Charger moving forward. Again, you're giving Justin Herbert a pass catching weapon, but you're also giving the team more blocking on the offensive line or on the outside of the offensive line to open up holes in that run game. This just feels like the biggest lock of the century.
Yeah, I think the only way they shy away from this for a pick is if somehow they're so high up in the draft they can get one of the top interior defensive linemen available. That would be the only other thing I could see them possibly going for over this tight end.
Yeah. Taking a look at the Atlanta Falcons, last year at the draft, we all thought they were going to be the first team to break that offensive streak and go for an edge rusher. We all thought Dallas Turner, you just penciled him into Atlanta. That didn't happen. Obviously, they selected Michael Penix. They have been still looking to fill in that edge rushing spot, and I think they take the best edge rusher in the class this year in Nick Scorton, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M. Again, we know they just need to continue to build up that defensive line and finally get some edge rushing pressure. And if Baker Mayfield is going to have those level of weapons going forward, you need to be able to get him down on the ground. Cam Ward, if he's going to be cool, calm, and collected behind that offensive line, you need to get him down. And then the Saints, we all know that if you can get Derek Carr just a little bit scared and put a little bit of poopy into his pants, you completely ruin their game. And Scorton is going to be able to bring that. And again, we haven't had those true elite edge rushers, but Scorton is the best edge here in this year's class, and he's going to be able to help this offense out just that, or pardon me, that defense just a little bit more.
Yeah, this was the Falcons' biggest need last year in the draft, and they didn't address it appropriately. So hopefully this year they learn from that. And
going over to the Denver Broncos, pretty much this entire offseason is going to be making Bo Nix's life just that much easier moving forward. And yeah, they have Courtland Sutton, but they traded away Jerry Jeudy last year. They drafted a wide receiver in the 4th round that played with Bo Nix. But if you can go out there and get Isaiah Bond, the fastest wide receiver in this year's draft class, and put that true burner, the only question is Bo Nix going to be able to hit him 55 yards down the field? That's going to be, if that's your biggest question, but you're going to be pretty satisfied and happy with ultimately what is going to be the situation there. And man, oh man, if the Broncos continue to just build this team, they're going to be scary in a couple years with Sean Payton and Bo Nix. Next up,
100%. They need extra wide receiver help there in Denver. Just more weapons for Bo Nix. You know, if they were picking earlier in the draft, I would say more O-line protection, but there's not a whole lot still available by this point in the draft for the first round.
Yeah, the 49ers and the Bears kind of took the tail end of the tackles, or the guys that you'd be comfortable moving from a tackle spot to a guard. At this point, I would say if you're going to choose a guard, you're reaching pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And right now for the Broncos, even earlier in the draft, if they can get one of those better wide receivers, I think they would take it, because they just need that little bit more help on that offense to give Bo Nix life just that much easier. Next up is the Baltimore Ravens. We have been talking about the entire season how this defense has been fraudulent. They need to get defensive help, and they need it badly. And the biggest weakness on this defense has been their secondary. Other than Kyle Hamilton, name me one good Ravens secondary player. And speaking of Kyle Hamilton, his team that he was on when he was in college, Notre Dame, they're going to select someone that he probably brought in as a recruit or played with, and that is Benjamin Morrison. Morrison is going to come in. Is he the best corner in this class? I think he's had a little bit of ups and downs this year, but all in all, he's going to be really solid for this Ravens team to ultimately have, and they are going to really utilize him and just make it really comfortable and just try to improve the secondary.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. This is the biggest thing that the Ravens need to address, their secondary.
At 24, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, stop me, anyone, if you've heard this before, but the Philadelphia Eagles are going to take a Georgia Bulldog on the defensive line, and that being Michael Williams. The Eagles, their edge rushing game has not been stellar this year. It hasn't been bad. It has been sacks by committee, but they haven't had anyone take off. Again, they traded away Hassan Reddick, who was one of their leaders in sacks last year, and they haven't really gotten the value from Bryce Huff that they would have expected when they ultimately signed him from the Jets. Adding Michael Williams to that already Georgia Bulldog filled defensive line, this is just one of those ones that just makes sense. We know Howie Roseman, he loves the Georgia Bulldogs, and he gets good players out of them, and this one almost just feels like a lock to me. It almost feels like what we saw with the Chargers and Loveland. It just feels like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, it's exactly what the Eagles have been doing for years, and it's what they're going to keep doing, I'm sure.
Moving over to your Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think you would be thinking that I'm going with a wide receiver here. No, I'm kidding. I am going with a wide receiver here, Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. He is a different wide receiver. He's more of your route running savvy wide receiver at Ohio State. And we all know going into this offseason, if the Steelers do one thing this offseason, that's just bring in wide receivers, 2 or 3, either in free agency and the draft. That's a win. That's a win for the Steelers.
Yeah.
I would look at this, and if there was another quarterback still available, I might have considered it, but it doesn't matter who's going to be playing quarterback next year, whether it's Russell Wilson, whether it's Justin Fields, whether it's me. You need wide receivers, because George Pickens, he's a good wide receiver. I think the NFL understands what George Pickens is. He is pretty much a go wide receiver that wins 50-50 balls. He just so happens right now to have a quarterback that is really good at throwing 50-50 balls. But that one dimension, if you get a corner that can stop that, then George Pickens is going to have a bad day. And Emeka Egbuka coming out there adds that number 2 wide receiver onto this team that just also adds that help. And it's the Steelers' biggest need. There is no need bigger to the Steelers than wide receiver.
No. Any pick in the first round beyond number 10, the Steelers will be taking a wide receiver. If they somehow fall far enough that they have a top 10 pick, that may shift, but anything beyond that top 10, it's a wide receiver for Pittsburgh.
And even then, in the top 10, I would be shocked to see them not look at the top potential wide receiver. Because again, we just look at this class, and the first wide receiver that went was obviously Travis Hunter. But like I said, I don't view him as that top guy. But it was top 10. Like, let's say the Steelers are at 10. They could take McMillan.
Yep. Oh, 100%.
Moving forward to the Minnesota Vikings, we've talked a lot about this team with their scary, scary defense, and they need some running back help because it hasn't been great. But I look at this and I go, your secondary isn't amazing. Like, you've been doing a lot of your damage with your front seven. And I have them selecting Denzel Burke, corner out of Ohio State. You need some offensive line. I think if they were to try to reach here at this point, again, it's just exactly that. It's a little bit of a reach for any offensive lineman at this point, and you're getting yourself a top secondary player. Because again, look at the receivers in your division. You have DJ Moore, you have Romo Dunze. If Keenan Allen stays with the Bears this offseason, that's those three guys. Then you look at what the Lions have with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, if he can stay on the field and not get suspended. You also have what the Packers do. They're not top tier names, but they're solid players. You need to be able to protect the sky in your own division. And this is one of those moves for the Vikings that just makes sense.
It does. At this point in the first round, you're going to be reaching to go after a running back or a guard. You're better off to wait till the second round for that. So going after the best corner you can get is the most logical option.
The Buffalo Bills at pick 27. This is a team that has been a lot better than we thought they were going to be this year. They're kind of in that retooling stage when you have a really, really good quarterback, a top 3 quarterback in the league. You're never going to be in a rebuilding stage. You're always going to be in a retooling. And their defense still needs a little bit of help, but the player that I'm picking is at a position of maybe not necessarily their biggest position of need, but that is linebacker Danny Stutzman. They haven't really had a true linebacker ever since Tremaine Edmonds went to the Bears. And this is just one of those things. You get your quarterback of the defense, the guy that can be in the middle portion and just control everything. We know Sean McDermott, he likes his linebackers, and this is a guy that can come in. He can ultimately settle things down. We know the Bills have some good edge rushers coming off the edge, and so getting that guy up the middle who can stuff some of the runs, who can cover some tight ends and slot receivers, and just kind of control everything, this is going to make that defense a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, as you were talking leading up to that, I thought for the first time we were going to have a severe disagreement on who you were picking, because I'm looking at this and going, there's nobody but Stutzman that the Bills should be taking right here, because they need to shore up the middle of their defense, and this is the best pick they could possibly make at this position.
I'm kind of curious to potentially think who you thought I was going for with that one.
Well, just the way you were talking, I thought you were going to go after an offensive player somewhere, like maybe Alec Manor or something like that.
Yeah, I think the Bills, they will be looking for a wide receiver this year in the draft and in free agency. I think Amari Cooper coming over to the team, if they can re-sign him, that's going to be a situation of just, they don't need to go after that particular position right here, right now. And with some of the wide receivers, Ale Manor, I'm not the world's biggest fan of him. I don't think he's been stellar. I still think he's a good player, but at this point for the Bills, I don't love that pick.
No, I think Stutzman is the pick they need to make. They need that linebacker. That, for me, is their biggest position of need going into this draft.
Next up is the Green Bay Packers, and last year, they drafted an offensive lineman to ultimately protect Jordan Love. Jordan Love has dealt with 2 injuries this year, one injury that has kept him out for a handful of weeks, and another injury that he's going to be dealing with. 2 different injuries, one being a knee and the other being, I believe, a growing injury. So you need to draft some more offensive linemen here. You need to protect him just that little bit more. And I look at Josh Simmons from Ohio State, the tackle, whether he's going to play tackle for you, whether he's going to play guard, you just need offensive linemen here. You need to get him some help. And this is just a situation where the more help that you can give Jordan Love up front, the better this team is going to be. Next up, we have the Washington Commanders. This was a hard pick for me to make because you could go with a wide receiver here, you could go with some offensive linemen, but the I just continue to go back to they have a defensive minded head coach. They traded away both of their edge rushers last year. Abdul Carter is a very, very talented edge rusher, and he could come in there and just be that number one guy for this Washington Commanders team. Again, the Commanders, they need to get offensive line help. I think they're going to be bringing guys in this offseason that are going to be able to help, but they have no one at the edge rushing spot. Their first round pick in last, or one of their, it was actually, pardon me, their second round draft pick last year in the D tackle out of Illinois. I'm forgetting his name, or Johnny Newton. Like he's starting to come on a little bit, and so you compare Carter with Newton, you're going to have a really solid defensive line moving forward, at least on the edge rushing terms. Houston Texans coming up next. This is the first time that I felt a team is really reaching for a player. The Texans, they have an offensive line issue here at the moment. Particularly, they have an interior offensive line problem at the moment. And Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama, is just such an like this is just such a need where I can see the Texans looking at it going, yeah, we're probably picking him 15 spots earlier than what we need to, but if we don't pick him now, we're probably not going to get him. And Booker, he's without a doubt the top rated guard in this class, the top rated true guard in this class. Now, I think some of the other tackles that have been drafted can slide into guard and potentially do a little bit of a better job than Booker, but for a guy who is just a true dedicated guard, Booker is that guy. And we saw the Texans this week get blown up in the interior, and they need that help, and Booker just makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, they're at a position where that they need to be drafting specific areas, whether it's a reach or not, just to be filling the gaps that they have.
Coming up next is the Detroit Lions. For me, I have them selecting Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher out of Ohio State. Aiden Hutchinson's injury was bad. We don't know if he's ever going to return to the Aiden Hutchinson that we know and love. And if the Lions don't make a big move for like a guy like a Myles Garrett or like a guy of Max Crosby, like these are situations where you need to bring in someone else. And I think they should bring in someone else, even if Aiden Hutchinson can get back to being 100% of what he is, because you're taking pressure off of him and you're also allowing your other edge rusher, in this case Jack Sawyer, to get a lot more one-on-one matchups. And you're basically just telling everyone in the NFC North, you better have your offensive line figured out, because if you don't, and we have both of these guys here, you're going to have a very, very bad day. And to me, this is just one of those moves of going, you're planning for if Hutchinson isn't going to be able to be 100%, but you're hoping that you can get him back 100% and have one of the best young edge rushing duos in the NFL.
Yeah, this is what they need to do. Like that was a horrible injury, and there's no guaranteeing he's even going to be able to come back from it, let alone come back the same.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Kansas City Chiefs here at pick 32. There was a lot of different spots that I could go to. I think they could have potentially added some more defensive players. They could have looked to add some more offensive players. Ultimately, I think they're just using this as a flex pick. I think they're going, you know what? What have we struggled with on offense this year? That's our running back game. And ever since Kareem Hunt has come back, it's been better. But Ashton Jeanty is so far and away the number one running back in this class. But Omari Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina, he is the second best guy. And I truly think bringing him into this Chiefs team with Isaiah Pacheco, that's going to be a very, very scary running back duo. And last time they drafted a running back in the first round, it really didn't work out. But you know what? There's even less expectations for this guy because you do have that Isaiah Pacheco, and just kind of ultimately going down that Lions approach of going, we can have two really top end running backs. This guy in Hampton, he's a little bit closer to an Ashton Genty than he is to Isaiah Pacheco. And having that little bit of a duo is going to be scary for Chiefs or for players who are teams playing the Chiefs. That is going to do it here today, guys, for my first official 2025 NFL mock draft. Again, we probably won't see another one here for at least probably a month at this point, if not closer to the end of the season. But hopefully you guys all enjoyed this. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment on the video, as it really helps out. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan, saying peace.